Okay, I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now. Put down your phone, sit up, because what I am about to tell you is the kind of story that genuinely reminds you, why being African in 2025 and 2026 is one of the most exciting things you can possibly be. Picture this: a bus, not just any bus, an electric bus, built by Ugandan engineers, designed at Makerere University, manufactured in Jinja. And on the 20th of November 2025, that bus, the Kayoola E-Coach, left Kampala, Uganda, and it drove all the way through Tanzania, through Zambia, through Botswana, through Eswatini, and all the way to Cape Town, South Africa. 13,000 kilometers, 3 countries, 39 days, 0 mechanical failures, one African dream made completely real. And then, because apparently Uganda was not done making history, the bus drove back home, all the way back to Kampala. I am your host. This is Africa Daily, and today we are celebrating something extraordinary. Let's get into it. I know what some of you are thinking. I know it, because when I first saw this story, I had the same reaction. Uganda makes electric buses? Like actually manufactures them, designs them, builds them from the ground up? Yes, that is exactly what I'm telling you. Let me introduce you to Kiira Motors Corporation, KMC, a state-owned electric vehicle company based in Jinja, Uganda's second-largest city. And the story of how it was born is the kind of thing that should be taught in every school on this continent. It starts in 2007 at Makerere University in Kampala, one of Africa's oldest and most respected universities. A group of students and their lecturers sat down and had a conversation that sounds almost naive in hindsight, but which turned out to be one of the most important conversations in East African industrial history. What if we built a car here in Uganda with Ugandan brains? That was the whole conversation. That was the whole idea. They had no experience. They had no factory. They barely had any funding. What they had was the audacity to believe it was possible, and a professor who refused to accept that Africa had to wait for someone else to solve Africa's problems. That professor was Professor Sandy Stevens Tikadri Pogboa of Makerere University, and he tells the story in a way that makes you want to stand up and clap. His team competed in an international vehicle design competition coordinated by MIT. That is right, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, involving 31 universities from across North America, Europe, and a handful from other regions. The Ugandan welding team got there and they came top, the best welding work at the entire competition. Ugandan students at a competition with teams from some of the most technologically advanced nations on Earth. The professor came home with no vehicle. He could not afford to ship it back, but he came home with something more powerful: evidence, proof. He got on every platform he could find and told Uganda, "We have the skills, we have the capacity, we can do this." 4 years later, in 2011, with support from the Ugandan government and personally from President Museveni, who apparently drove the prototype himself and then immediately committed state support, Kiira Motors Corporation was born. By 2014, it was a formal state enterprise, and by 2025, the year of this expedition, it was operating Africa's single largest electric bus manufacturing plant. Let me say that again: Africa's largest electric bus manufacturing plant in Jinja, Uganda. 100 acres, capacity for 22 buses per day, 3,000 jobs, built by Ugandans. I don't know about you, but I am genuinely giddy right now. Part 2. Meet the Kayoola E-Coach 13M Model 2025. Before we get to the expedition, because that story is absolutely worth its own section, let me tell you about the bus itself. Because the Kayoola eCoach 13M Model 2025 is not a basic stripped-down proof of concept. This thing is genuinely impressive. Kiira Motors describes it as a premium African intercity high-floor electric coach built for a new age of mobility. And when you go through the specifications, that description earns itself. 500 kilometers on a single charge. Let that land. 500 kilometers between charges. For context, that is the distance from Johannesburg to Durban on a single battery. No stops, no fuel, no emissions, just smooth, silent electric power across the continent. The motor produces 400 kilowatts of power with 5,000 newton meters of torque. For the non-engineers watching, that is serious pulling power for a large intercity bus across African roads. Top speed, 100 kilometers per hour. Passenger capacity, up to 64 passengers on the full intercity model. Now here is where it gets even more impressive, because inside this bus, you are not roughing it. You are not squeezing into a budget ride. You are in a genuinely comfortable, modern, fully equipped coach. High-back reclining passenger seats with 3-point seat belts, the same standard you would get on a premium European coach. A USB charging port at every single seat, not some seats, every seat. 2 19-inch LCD monitors for information and entertainment. And I genuinely smiled when I read this, 4G LTE Wi-Fi throughout the entire bus. You are crossing the African savannah on a locally built electric bus with Wi-Fi. I mean, what a time to be alive! There is air conditioning, there is a cashless payment system. You get a card, you swipe to board, you tap to exit, the system automatically deducts the fare. The driver has a protected cabin, multiple internal cameras monitoring every section of the bus, emergency hammers on the windows, fire extinguishers, emergency exit doors. The safety architecture on this bus is genuinely comprehensive. Bamboo interior paneling, because why not use Africa's own materials inside an African-made bus? That detail alone tells you something about the design philosophy of the people who built this. And crucially, the engineering, the body frame, the welding, the structural panels, all made in Uganda. The electrical systems, the motors, the batteries, sourced from suppliers, yes, but with a clear target. 65% local content by 2030. They are not just assembling a foreign design, they are building toward full African manufacturing capability component by component, year by year. The buses have collectively covered more than 600,000 kilometers in operation across Uganda, Rwanda, Kenya, and Tanzania without major issues. These are not prototype vehicles. These are working, revenue-generating, community-serving buses. They have been tested on real African roads by real African commuters, and they work. Part 3. The Expedition. Now, the Expedition. Okay, so it is November 2025. Kiira Motors has a new flagship model, the 2025 Kayoola eCoach 13M, and someone at KMC has an idea. What if we just drove it to Cape Town? Now, look, I want you to appreciate what this means. Cape Town and Kampala are not neighbors. The road between them runs through 6 countries, across the equator, through mountain ranges, desert stretches, varying road quality, border crossings, climate zones that shift from equatorial heat to South African winter. And through all of this, the bus was going to drive an electric bus. A bus that needed to be charged along the way, across countries where electric vehicle charging infrastructure ranges from limited to virtually non-existent. Critics, and there were critics, you can see the quotes in the social media responses, said there was absolutely no way they were making it to South Africa. The KMC team saw it and called it what it was: haters. On November 20th, 2025, the Made in Uganda Grand Trans-Africa Electric Expedition was flagged off in Kampala. The Minister of Works and Transport, General Edward Katumba Wamala, stood at the send-off and said, "As we flag off this historic expedition, we are sending a message to the world. Uganda believes in its people, its technology, and Africa's capacity to shape a sustainable future. This is a journey of belief, innovation, and proof in motion." And then the bus moved. Day 1, 240 kilometers from Namboli to Mutukula, the Uganda-Tanzania border. Battery at 30% on arrival, meaning they had used 70% of a full charge to cover 240 kilometers across Ugandan roads. The team pulled over, gave thanks, and prepared for border crossings. Tanzania was the first major test. The Tanzania leg covered 1,771 kilometers from Mutukula to Tunduma on the Zambian border, passing through Dodoma and navigating the country's famously variable road conditions. Not a test track, real roads, real weather, real Africa. The bus maintained an efficiency of 0.85 kilowatt-hours per kilometer across the entire Tanzania stretch. Engineers who reviewed those numbers described them as excellent for a bus of that size in those conditions. Then Zambia. Long stretches between population centers. Mpika, roughly halfway through Zambia, tested the battery's range claims under real commercial load conditions. Every kilometer completed, every charge cycle documented, every performance metric published publicly by the team in real time. By November 28th, 8 days into the journey, the bus had covered 2,370 kilometers and was deep into Zambia. The team had consumed 2,017 kilowatt-hours of energy. They published these numbers because they had nothing to hide. Real data, real performance, real transparency. Botswana, Eswatini, and then South Africa. On December 5, 2025, the Kayoola E-Coach rolled into Johannesburg, 4,916 kilometers from home, 38.7% of the total journey, arrived without mechanical failure. A Ugandan delegation was there to meet it, including the High Commissioner to South Africa, Paul Amoru. The numbers by the Johannesburg arrival: an estimated 2,270 kilograms of carbon emissions prevented compared to a diesel equivalent. Not theoretical, calculated from actual fuel that would have been burned on the same journey. And then the commercial moment that changed everything. In Johannesburg, KMC announced a signed contract for 450 Kayoola E-coaches and 75 DC fast charging stations with a South African transport company. 450 buses, confirmed, signed, done. The expedition team had gone into the trip with a target of 1,000 bus orders. They came back with 450 confirmed contracts and approximately 370 more in active negotiations, a total of 820 potential orders from a single expedition. And Eswatini also ordered buses and 75 charging stations. Then the bus continued south, all the way to Cape Town. On December 12, 2025, the Kayoola E-Coach arrived at the Sun Square in Cape Town at 7:02 p.m. The Ugandan Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation, Dr. Monica Musanero, was there to receive it. The bus had covered 7,125 kilometers on the first leg alone. 6 countries, mountains, desert, city corridors, diverse climates, 0 mechanical failures. The team prayed, they cried, they cheered. One of the team members, captured on video, said, "If you had told me that 13,000 kilometers later, 39 days later, we would be back in Kampala, I would not have believed you, but thanks to the Kayoola E-Coach." The return journey began on December 13th, and on approximately December 28, 2025, after 39 days on the road and over 13,600 kilometers traveled, the Kayoola e-coach rolled back into Kampala to a hero's welcome. The 48-member expedition team was received at the Metroplex Mall in Nalyali district. The Minister of Works and Transport was there, government officials were there, the media was there, and the people, the ordinary Ugandans who had been following this journey update by update on social media, were there too. The head of the expedition's legal team, Elias Bwambale, captured the achievement with one line: "When you travel more than 13,000 kilometers across borders, climate zones, and varied terrain, and return with only one incident, you know that something has worked exceptionally well." One incident, over 13,000 kilometers, across 6 countries, on their maiden long-distance expedition. That is not luck. That is engineering. Part 4. Why this story matters beyond the wow factor. Because there is a wow factor, absolutely there is, but underneath all the excitement is something genuinely important for this continent. Africa has a transport problem, a serious one. Our cities are choking. Kampala, Lagos, Nairobi, Johannesburg. The pollution from millions of combustion engine vehicles is not abstract. It is the sky above you every morning. It is the lungs of your children. It is the cost of diesel fuel, which fluctuates with every global crisis, every war in the Middle East, every pipeline dispute on the other side of the world, and which Africa imports at enormous expense because we do not control the supply chain. Electric buses address all of that simultaneously. They remove tailpipe emissions, they remove fuel price exposure, they dramatically reduce maintenance costs over a vehicle's lifetime because electric drivetrains have far fewer moving parts than diesel engines. They can be charged from renewable energy sources, and Africa has more solar potential than almost any region on Earth. But here is the thing that makes the Kiira Motors story different from simply buying electric buses from China or Europe. These buses are made here, designed here, assembled here by African engineers who trained at African universities and who are building the skills, the institutional knowledge, and the industrial capacity that will allow Africa to compete in the global electric vehicle market, not as a customer, but as a manufacturer. The professor who started all of this, who took his students to Turin, who pitched the president with PowerPoint presentations when there was no car to show, who fought the education system and the bureaucracy and the funding gaps for years, said something that I think is worth quoting. African problems need African solutions. But more than that, we need to groom young minds to actually do things, not just reproduce what the professor says, actually build, actually make. That is exactly what Kiira Motors is doing. And the expedition to Cape Town was not just a marketing exercise, it was a live stress test. 13,000 kilometers of real African roads, generating real data on battery performance, charging requirements, mechanical reliability, and energy consumption across 6 different climates, 6 different road conditions. No simulation, no controlled test track. The real thing. And that data, published transparently throughout the journey, is now in the hands of African transport authorities, private operators, and potential investors who need to make decisions about whether to trust this technology. The expedition answered that question more convincingly than any brochure or press release ever could. Let me give you some numbers that I want you to share with everyone you know, because these deserve to be repeated. 13,700 kilometers covered across 6 African countries on a single electric bus built in Uganda. No European technical team, no imported expertise to run the expedition. Ugandan engineers and operators driving their own bus through their own continent. 39 days total journey time, including the return from Cape Town to Kampala. 0.85 kilowatt-hours per kilometer, the energy efficiency recorded across the Tanzania leg, one of the most challenging stretches of the journey. That is a strong result for a bus of that size on those roads. 600,000 kilometers, the total distance Kiira Motors bus fleet had covered across Uganda, Rwanda, Kenya, and Tanzania before the expedition, without major mechanical issues. These are not prototypes, they are working commercial vehicles. 450 confirmed bus orders secured in South Africa during the expedition, plus approximately 370 more in active negotiations from a single trip. The expedition team went in hoping for 1,000 orders. They came back with commercial momentum that suggests they may well exceed that target as negotiations conclude. 75 DC fast charging stations also contracted in South Africa alongside the bus order. 2,270 kilograms of carbon emissions prevented on the Kampala to Johannesburg leg alone, compared to an equivalent diesel journey. 22 buses per day, the production capacity of Kiira vehicle plant in Jinja when running at full capacity. 3,000 jobs the plant is designed to create in Uganda when fully operational. 65% the local content target Kiira Motors has set for component manufacturing by 2030. And perhaps my favorite number, 5,400, the amount of something that Uganda's transport minister mentioned at the welcome back ceremony. He said the country had saved approximately 5,400 units of, and then paused looking for the word, of carbon. Around 15 million rand equivalent in fuel saved by the electric bus fleet operating in Uganda. That is not theoretical. That is real money that stayed in Uganda instead of going to fuel importers. The people behind the bus. I want to take a moment to talk about the people inside this story, because it is easy to celebrate a bus. It is more important to celebrate the people who built it. The engineering team at Kiira Motors is predominantly young. When you look at who is doing this work, the welding, the body shop, the trim, the electrical systems, the quality inspection, you are looking at engineers who graduated from Ugandan universities, in many cases from Makerere. They did not go to Germany to learn how to build buses. They learned here. They built here. And now they are building something that a South African transport company has ordered 450 of. One female engineer at KMC, speaking about what it is like to work in what is still a male-dominated field, said something I found quietly powerful. She said Kiira Motors is genuinely committed to gender balance in its workforce, that they strive for an equal share of men and women, that this has made the working environment comfortable and productive, that it is competitive because there are many talented people there, but competitive in a collaborative way, not a cutthroat way. She said the company welcomes everyone as long as you have skills and hunger for knowledge. That culture, built by a professor who started with classroom experiments and PowerPoint presentations, and students who believed something impossible, is now producing engineers who are building the transportation infrastructure of a continent. The bus driver who operates the Kayoola on the Jinja to Uganda route was interviewed during the expedition buildup. He said the electric bus is very smooth, quiet, comfortable to drive, and his advice to other drivers who are still resisting the shift to electric: come to Kiira Motors, get trained, Learn the bus, because the world is going green, and if you sit on yourself, the world will leave you behind. The operator, the captain of the bus on that daily route, not an engineer, not a government official, just a driver who makes his living moving people across Uganda on a locally made electric bus. And he gets it. He understands what is happening. He is excited about it. That is when you know something real has changed, when the ordinary person operating the thing is proud of it. The Grand Trans-Africa Electric Expedition is over. The bus is back in Kampala. The team has been celebrated. The contracts have been signed. The data has been published. But the story is just beginning. Because this expedition was not the end of something. It was the beginning of a commercial chapter for Kiira Motors that nobody who dismissed African manufacturing capability was expecting. 450 buses are going to be manufactured in Jinja and delivered to a South African transport company. That means production scale. That means more workers. That means more engineering graduates employed. That means supply chain development. That means more local components. That means more of that 65% local content target being achieved ahead of schedule. The bus has proven, in the most difficult and most public way possible, that African-made electric vehicles can handle the African continent. Not laboratory conditions, the real thing. Mountain passes, desert heat, dirt roads, border crossings, climate shifts from equatorial humidity to South African autumn. All of it, without mechanical failure. The MTN executive who watched the bus arrive in Cape Town said something that I want to close with, because it sums up what this expedition means better than any headline. This expedition has proved something very, very powerful. Electric mobility in Africa is not a future story, it is now the story. Not future, now. And the people telling that story are Ugandan engineers who started with a classroom dream in 2007, built their first prototype in a university shed, drove their president around in it until he promised them funding, and then spent the next 18 years quietly, methodically, building one of the most remarkable automotive success stories on this continent. And then they drove their bus to Cape Town to prove it. On Africa Daily, we talk about African excellence all the time, but there are moments when the evidence is so clear, so complete, so undeniable that all I can do is stop talking and just point. This is one of those moments. Uganda built a bus. Uganda drove it to Cape Town. Uganda came home with contracts in hand. That is the Africa that is coming. And honestly, I cannot wait. This has been Africa Daily. Share this episode everywhere because this story deserves to be heard on every corner of this continent. I will see you next time.